and minimum standard of living to be assured, but we are still not able to assure a minimum basic level of standard of living. So we're having this meeting with our partners today. This is a historic marriage. That is what I talked about yesterday. We have our own cultures and values. We share those values. And between ourselves, we need to try to work to shorten the distance between ourselves so that we can walk our path towards success. The reason why Japan has achieved what it has achieved so far, you know this very well. Japan is at the head of advanced countries, and we believe that we can learn a great deal from Japan in these difficult times. Japan has achieved remarkable development, and the world paid attention to Japan's success, and at the same time, the tradition and culture had been maintained while Japan moved toward development. This is something that many countries around the world can learn from Japan. To everyone here, I just would like to express my deepest gratitude. My friends from Japan, and my friends to the entire world, I'd like to thank you indeed for the friendship. But in this historic conference that we are holding today, the people in Africa, with their hopes and aspirations and dreams, we would like to engage in discussion as to how those dreams and aspirations can be achieved. The leaders who aspired to be independent, that was the dream that they held and embraced. We are now in a new stage, which is separate and different from the previous stage. This is a totally new stage that we're in. In the 21st century, we're in 2020s in the 21st century. We have the COVID pandemic, and because of that pandemic, many catastrophic situations have emerged, and we're faced with difficulty. But once again, we are reminded of the importance of international cooperation. And it also shows that the level of international cooperation has not achieved the level that we all want. The countries in the north, they were able to inject vaccines to many people, many times over than the people in Africa. And between many countries, there were wars and conflicts. And in the midst of globalization, in early 1990s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s, there have been many conflicts. As if we are going back to the 19th century. To our partners in Japan, your experience, the potential, our goals, and our dreams, I am convinced that we'll be able to achieve our dreams with your cooperation. Tunisia, ever since we have entered into this stage, a new balance, a new power balance of the world is something that we have been calling upon. Africa has a lot of resources. African countries do have a lot of resources and riches, and we do have many options, but still, people are still suffering from poverty and difficulties. These issues and problems, we need to address these issues and problems, compare ourselves to the approaches taken in the past, to think of the way to achieve our objectives, to achieve stability, to all the humanity of the world. The issue is not just an issue for one single country. We are faced with the issues that relates to all of humankind. UN Charter and other international law would have relevance to the issues that we are faced with. We're now entering into a new stage. A lot of transformations are taking place. What we need to do a new mechanism which is different from the past. We need to create a new mechanism to move forward. Stable political situation. In such a context, we need to create a new mechanism. Within a half century, African countries have found themselves in this situation, and we need to explore the reason why we are in this situation today. By doing so, we can aspire to build a new society. The framework of Africa, and even outside of Africa, new sources of funding and vaccines that are in shortage, that is being sought around the world. We need to be building schools. We need to closely examine the history to think of why we find ourselves in this situation. We need to study that and examine that closely so that we can come up with a new approach, so that we can realize and achieve our dreams. With this conference with Japan, the conference has achieved many things within a short span of time. The distance in time and distance in history can be shrunk. That is needed for all of humankind. That is what I would like to emphasize. Given the instability in the world, instability in the balance of power in the world, that is the way to resolve these issues that is faced by the world. The people in Africa do have rich human resources. This is our true treasure in Africa. In encouraging future investment, a better environment can be assured. To investors, to encourage more investment. The investment has to be assured that it is safe. And as a result, more jobs will be created, and human resources could be developed further to become our treasure. We need to discuss all the problems and issues that we face. To do so, to our friends, and with our friends, and with our allies, we need to engage in dialogue. Everyone. Because time is limited, let me conclude by thanking all of you for attending this conference. Your remarks will be limited in terms of time for only a few minutes. However, I had the honor of making a few remarks at the outset. Let me welcome you to Tunisia. And this strong determination that we all share would be carving out a new future for us, a new age for us. I am convinced of that, and thank you very much for your attention.
الكلمة الآن للسيد الرئيس ماكي سال.
Now we'd like to invite His Excellency Mr. Macky Sall, the President of the Republic of Senegal. President, floor is yours. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, President Saied, the President of the Republic of Tunisia. And His Excellency Mr. Fumio Kishida, the Prime Minister of Japan, and friends, heads of states, leaders, Chairperson of the AU Commission, Deputy Director General of the United Nations, ministers of the countries, ambassadors representing AU. I would like to pay tribute to former Prime Minister Abe. I wish to convey my deepest sympathy and condolences to family and government and people of Japan. And to the governments of Tunisia and Japan, I'd like to express my appreciation. TICAT 8 is being held. This is the conference between partners, between the continent and Japan. And we were welcomed warmly by Kais Saied, President of Tunisia. We were welcomed by very warm welcome in traditional manner. I feel it's very fortunate that Morocco is not participating because of lack of consensus with regards to the issue of the representation. I hope that resolution can be found soon so that our partnership can be back to a good condition. 30 years ago, the ticket was started in Tokyo, and the commitments have been met. And specifically, there have been fruits in terms of education, vocational training, agriculture, health, water resource. In many fronts, there have been advances being made. Those performances made the partnership of TICAT a model partnership. And 3 years ago in Yokohama, new leap advance was committed. And I'd like to express again the support of the Japanese government and in African countries taking measures against pandemic. There have been multilateral and bilateral support being provided. I'd like to again express my gratitude. And there have been support through COVAX. And in terms of the production of the vaccine in the continent, biotechnology and pharmaceutical production, with regards to that, it is possible to be done. Some countries have already started that. The process has already started. Currently, economy is facing very difficult situation. African countries are facing challenges from pandemic and also from the war in Ukraine. And that's why we are engaged in advocacy. SDR's deployment is being sought after. What we like to see is that SDR is to be shifted from developed countries to the continent. And we're thinking about post-corona situation. Currently, because of the war in Ukraine, we're facing a very big crisis. The G20 is to give a suspension for debt return. It is very helpful in economic recovery. We like to see that debt management in fair manner. We like to see the station where we can use the resource, our resource, for ourselves to gain competitiveness in our economy and to make everybody being able to access energy. That is another goal of ours. And there was a G20 consensus in terms of the seas of Africa. We would like to participate in the management of the international financing, and we're gaining support in terms of G20 activities. And for Japan to be able to participate as a permanent member of the Security Council, we'd like to cooperate. And also with regards to food and agriculture, we'd like to expand our agricultural production. And we'd like to see the station where we have more production in terms of agricultural products, and we'd like to improve the value chain. In Africa, 60% are the croplands, and we have human resources, we have labor power. And there is a private and public partnership. And I would like to see a transfer of technology, and we'd like to see a win-win situation between the continent and Japan. And we'd like to see a production of fertilizer in Africa. Many countries have different potential. We like to leverage that. And in terms of stricter partnership, we welcome participation of private sector players from Japan in the TICAT process, and collaboration is very important. the financing mechanism has to be developed and run in appropriate manner so that partnership can lead to creation of a new business opportunities. And we can mutually grow together. In Japan, innovation is being leveraged to find a new way of solving problems. Under WTO rule, there was a limit to dynamic innovation in Africa, but Japan found a new way, a collaborative way, to make the innovation happen in a large scale. The export credit can be now extended for longer period, and the applicable percentage is to be lowered. And in terms of the rating of Africa, it is not really representing the true situation of Africa. The low rating of Africa is given by impression, and we have to change that. And the financing need to be done in a appropriate manner as well. Otherwise, cooperation cannot continue. TICAD started in 1993, as you know, and the world has changed. We're now in a different stage of the history. There are new challenges, and we are now starting to see a new world. We have to adapt to the new world. Our collaboration need to be adjusted to the reality of today. And we have to leverage the true meaning or significance of TICAD. And peace is a very big topic for Africa. And for the growth of Africa, structural reform is being worked on. AU created an agency which is called NIPAD, which is to work on development issues. And resource for regional development is being utilized. And through partnership, economic development is to be advanced. And third pillar of TICAD is sustainable resilience. I would like to be up to the expectation for the future. We'd like to continue seeing the cooperation between Japan and Africa. Thank you.
السيد الرئيس بخالص التقدير والشكر.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, from the President Sall of Senegal. Thank you very much for very warm words. I was truly touched by his words. Earlier on, various institutions that have been mentioned, and through TICAD in Africa, I believe we will be able to unleash and fulfill our promises and capabilities. And from next year, we need to bring on changes. Changes need to happen inside as well as outside. And although we were able to see generational gaps, perhaps we will be able to overcome those discrepancies. Next, may I invite Prime Minister Kishida of Japan. If you could give us your address from Tokyo. on online basis. And it is most unfortunate that you have contracted COVID, and I am praying sincerely for your recovery soon. TICAD and the partnership between African Union and Japan is precious. So, Prime Minister Kishida, please take the floor. His Excellency.
共和国大統領、サル・セネガル共和国大統領、ご列席の皆様、初のアフリカ開催となったナイロビでの TICAD6 に安倍元総理とともに、外相として参加してから6年。
Foreign Affairs, together with the late former Prime Minister Abe. Now, as Prime Minister, I am very pleased to co-chair TICAD 8, held this time in Tunis. Even though I am participating online, my passion for the development in Africa remains unchanged. Together with you all, I am determined to deepen the relationship between Japan and Africa through TICAD. Africa, which is expected to account for a quarter of the world's population by 2050, is a young and hopeful continent where we can expect dynamic growth. Mr. Kuma Kengo, one of Japan's leading architects, considers his experience in Western Africa to be his starting point as an architect. He is now devoting himself to training young Africans. For him, Africa is a special place where he was inspired and learned a lot. During his youth, Mr. Kuma designed the main stadium for the 2020 Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics. I hope one day young Africans will follow him in designing architecture that represents their respective countries. Japan aspires to be a partner growing together with Africa. We will work together with Africa to overcome challenges in the region and thus strongly support Africa's development. Japan also learns and grows through that experience. Japan will promote its initiatives with approaches quintessentially Japanese, focusing on people. It is my hope that through a vicious cycle of growth and through a virtuous cycle of growth and distribution, Japan will help realize a resilient Africa that Africa itself aims to achieve. At TICAD 7, Japan announced a $20 billion in financial contributions to Africa within the private sector. And we essentially achieved it over the last 3 years, this time at TICAD 8, focusing on people as individuals, specifically investment in people and the quality of growth. Japan is going to invest $30 billion as the sum of public and private financial contribution over the next 3 years. First, we will promote green growth. We are going to launch Japan's Green Growth Initiative with Africa and contribute $4 billion in public and private financial contribution in total. Second, we will promote investment. In particular, we are going to focus on startup companies in which energetic young people from Japan and Africa will be engaged. Third, we will provide co-financing of up to $5 billion together with the African Development Bank in order to improve the lives of African people. This includes a special newly created loan of up to $1 billion from Japan for the purpose of advancing reforms that result in sound debt management and helping a resilient and sustainable Africa. Fourth, the spread of COVID-19 has made clear the importance of dealing with infectious diseases. I announced today that Japan will contribute up to $1.08 billion to the Global Fund's seventh replenishment over the next 3 years. Taking the concept of human security as our basis, Japan will focus on Africa and aim to contribute to supporting measures to counter the 3 major infectious diseases of HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, and strengthening health systems. Fifth, we will promote human resource development. What supports the future of Africa and Japan is their people. Japan has been making contributions to human resource development in Africa for many years. For example, the Noguchi Medical Research Institute in Ghana, where Japan has been contributing to the education of local researchers since the institute's founding 4 decades ago, is now playing an important role on the front line of the fight against COVID-19 in Western Africa. Based on these results, over the next 3 years, we will work to cultivate more than 300,000 professionals in a wide range of fields that include industry, health, medicine, education, agriculture, justice, and administration. The African Business Education Initiative for Youth, or ABE Initiative, has educated around 4,000 young African people as pilots supporting businesses in Japan and Africa. Mr. Amedayono Trevor Christian from Côte d'Ivoire is one of these promising young Africans. With the expertise he acquired in Japan, he developed an app that performs scholarship information searches. Thanks to that app, more young people in his country have been able to find opportunities to study at universities. Many other young people like Trevor are next-generation business leaders in Africa who address social issues in their home countries while building multi-layer networks between Japan and Africa. It is also important to revitalize cross-border travel. Japan has recently reviewed its travel advice and warning on infectious diseases for countries and regions within low numbers of COVID-19 infections, including many African countries. I look forward to an expansion of activities by the people between Japan and Africa. Sixth is regional stabilization, which is a prerequisite if Africa is to unleash the potential of its people and essential for realizing African development. In Zambia, after receiving livelihood improvement support from JICA, a former refugee came to speak of her dreams of attending school and starting a business. One characteristic of Japanese support is that we go beyond refugee assistance to support refugees until they are independent and able to earn a living, thereby covering their needs until a sustainable and stable society is realized. If we are to realize the peace and prosperity of Africa and also the world, we must maintain and strengthen the rule-based, free and open international order. We will strengthen coordination at various levels between Africa and Japan to promote a free and open Indo-Pacific and work to strengthen the functions of the United Nations as a whole, including through Security Council reform, among other efforts. As we try to move towards a world without nuclear weapons, we will be working closely with the African nations. In the present moment, there are difficult circumstances facing in creation of the world without nuclear weapons. I myself, on the 1st of this month, have attended the NPT review at the conference, and I have advocated for the Hiroshima Action Plan, which is based upon 5 actions. I have called upon for constructive response by all the countries, and Japan has made all-out efforts to try to result in a meaningful conclusions. And there were serious debate made between the parties. But even so, at the very last minute, Russia has opposed. So it is extremely regrettable that no outcome document has been adopted. But many of the parties have stated the importance of once again maintaining and reinforcing NPT. Japan will work together with Africa to pursue a realistic efforts as the only country, because the only way for realistic endeavors towards nuclear disarmament will be to maintain and further strengthen NPT, where both the nuclear states and non-nuclear states both can participate. Russia's aggression against Ukraine shakes the very foundations of the international order. If we give up the rule-based international order and allow changes to the status quo by force, the effects will also spread to Africa and the world. We should not backtrack from the forward-looking steps of the international community has taken thus far. Ongoing aggression has hindered the export of grain from Ukraine, and the food crisis in Africa has become more serious than ever. Japan, as a partner of Africa, will do its best to improve the situation. Japan has recently decided to make a contribution of around $130 million in food assistance to African countries. In addition, Japan will provide $300 million to bolster food production through co-financing with the African Development Bank and assist with capacity building for 200,000 people in the agricultural sector. International coordination is also vital for strengthening food security in Africa. Japan will accelerate its efforts in close partnership with the international community. Building upon the discussions at TICAD 8, Japan will strongly support development in Africa on the basis of African ownership as a partner growing together with Africa, looking ahead to the G7 Hiroshima summit to be held next year. South Africa's former President Nelson Mandela said, "After climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb." Indeed, we see that there are many hills left to climb. Japan is eager to climb those hills together with Africa. I look forward to having a fruitful discussion with you all over these 2 days. Thank you very much for your attention.
أتوجه إليكم بالشكر الجزيل على هذه الكلمة وعلى استعداد
Thank you very much for the speech. And Japan is providing support in the area of agriculture, education, and other areas. And we would like to express our gratitude. And you talked about the words from President Nelson Mandela. There's a poet of Tunisia, Africa Shabi. He also have said similar things. And also, as Prime Minister mentioned, the collaborative relationship is what will make us possible to climb the hills. We will be able to overcome all the challenges. The new collaboration between African continent and Japan, I hope that solidarity is to be advanced in many different areas. We hope that the people of Africa can climb the hills. And thank you very much, Prime Minister. We would like to now continue just from the Moussa Mohammed.
UNDP.
الكلمة للسيد موسى فكي. رئيس مفوضية الاتحاد الأفريقي.
No, this will be His Excellency Moussa Fakih, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, will be the next speaker.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In fact, His Excellency President Macky Sall, President of the Republic of Senegal, the current Chairman of the African Union, Excellency Mr. Fumio Kishida, Prime Minister of Japan, His Majesty, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, and Heads of Delegation, Madam Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, and Sen, the Administrator of UNDP, and the President of the World Bank, the President of the African Development Bank, Mr. Adesina, Director General of WTO, Madam Ngozi, Madam Deputy Chairperson of the Commission of the African Union, the Executive CEO of NEPAD, and Secretary General of AFCFTA. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to President Kais Saied, President of the Republic of Tunisia, and to the government and people of Tunisia for having accepted to host the 8th session edition of TICAD, and also thank them for the warm welcome accorded to us since our arrival here. You will allow me to also extend my gratitude to the co-organizers, UNDP and the World Bank. And it's also for me to bow to the memory of late Prime Minister Abe, who was tragically brought down in political activity, and he was closely associated to this partnership. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I want to commend the convening of this 8th TICAD within the context of the health crisis, food security and energy crisis in the world, and particularly in Africa. The assessment of the partnership reveals the need for the development of Africa and also in the various areas, thus education, capacity building, and also the Shinzo Abe initiatives, the period 2013-2018, and Japan has welcomed more than 1,000 young Africans who have benefited from training in the various fields, nutrition, through the initiative which is implemented in some more than 10 countries. Is also a plan for nutrition, which obviously developed a multi-sectoral approach. The support for infrastructures in order to promote the process of industrialization. And at the 7th edition in 2019 of TICAD, more than 72 billion yen, that is $500 billion, have been invested by Japan in the sector of infrastructure in order to strengthen and intensify connectivity across Africa. Priority given to the growing of rice in order to double the rice production. The contribution of JICO and JICA for the promotion of the private sector and the management of debt and the macroeconomic stability, and also how the climate of business is also to be not to be overemphasized. The contribution of the private sector should be supported by constant and sustained support. And in fact, today the debt of Japan is less than 2%, and also since 2000. With regard to trade and the contribution of Japan in the imports from Africa remains very low, and obviously we have been seeing only the import of raw materials. In the area of peace and security, in fact, within the context of human security, A lot of activities have been carried out in order to ensure sustainable development and also the contribution to peace building and peace keeping, and also the empowerment of women, the promotion of youth, are the new areas where we are moving with this concept. Human security, and also attention has been focused on, we have to note the contribution of Japan in development in Africa and also to deal with COVID-19, and also in the area of pharmaceutical production within the framework of the partnership with JICA and NEPAD. Ladies and gentlemen, with challenges, we need to improve this partnership. We have to look for greater coherence between our various interests in order to avoid any imbalance and also what we want to do and what we want to realize. A reorientation of this partnership towards the objectives of the African Union with this Agenda 2063 is necessary. The articulation between the flagship projects on infrastructure, transport, energy, agriculture, health, human capital, industrialization, dictate that we want to have a TICAD that will go beyond just bilateral cooperation between Japan and our member states. Better than ever before, African Union demands that it has specialized agencies and also in its development policies, and also as regards development. To mention a few, I just referred to the African AUDA NEPAD, CDC, the African Continental Free Trade Area, AMA, the African Medicines Agency, which has been in fact set up in order to play the role that is weighted in their different areas. And therefore, we need this partnership at the continental level to weigh in. TICAD 8 is not only a moment to consolidate, but also to have the necessary adjustment in order to redetermine the continental priorities, post-COVID economy, the improvement of our health system, the energy transition, the fight against climate change, and also debt alleviation should be the source and the structure. My ardent wish is that TICAD should innovate and have a more ambitious plan of action, and by providing with the necessary means for the execution in order to have projects that could be implemented, executed, and also evaluated. We also have to emphasize the role of the private sector in the implementation of these strategies, and the announcement made by the Honorable Prime Minister of Japan of $30 billion is very encouraging. Thus, we will have given more life and enthusiasm to this partnership. I thank you for your kind attention.
شكرا لكم من الأعماق السيد موسى فكي على هذه الكلمة الهادفة والتي أوضحت.
Thank you very much. And with a speech, in a brief manner, today's session was visibly explained. Economic situation was really well understood. And the situation of reform was also clearly explained. Next, we'd like to hear from Ms. Amina Mohammed, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Dear President Saied, dear President Sall, dear Prime Minister Kishida, my brother, the Chair of the African Union Commission, Moussa Fakih, leaders of our international institutions, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to start by expressing my sincere gratitude to the government and the people of Tunisia for their hospitality, and to the co-chairs of the summit, the government of Japan and the government of Senegal for their leadership and support of Africa. I would also like to take the opportunity to wish Prime Minister Kishida a quick and speedy recovery and to bring greetings from the Secretary General to this august gathering. As the first TCAD conference foresaw over 27 years ago, there can be no sustainable development for all unless sustainable development is achieved in Africa. This conviction of the Japanese leadership has borne fruit in the years since on the continent. While we have made progress in many areas, today the challenges before us are immense and all at risk of the gains being lost in economic, environmental, social, and human rights. Today, I'm privileged to be on this podium, but as an endangered species, as one can see. Excellencies, thanks to platforms such as TCAD, we have already the partnerships in place to respond to these challenges in solidarity. This partnership must ensure concrete commitments and political ambition delivered to achieve Agenda 2030 and 2063 for the peoples of Africa. Africa's wealth is in natural resources, in arable land, and in its vibrant young population, especially our women. The continent holds the key to its own development, and through its integration into the global economy, will ensure that the world is able to overcome many of our challenges today. But too often, the world relegates Africa to the detriment of us all. And yet, the Africa we want is still very much in reach. Taken together, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the African Union 2063 Agenda provide the blueprint to achieve sustainable development on the continent. To do so, the world will need urgently and collectively to address the cascading impacts of the multiple crises we face today. The COVID-19 pandemic recovery, the impacts of the war in Ukraine, the climate emergency, and the financial crises which are already placing vulnerable populations under extreme stress. This perfect storm is in turn creating a fertile breeding ground for exacerbating existing and future conflicts and unrest, and that is compromising our collective efforts to achieve the SDGs, save lives and livelihoods. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we do have an unprecedented chance to overcome these challenges and address Africa's security and sustainable development needs. The African Continental Free Trade Area represents a great opportunity to industrialize, diversify, and digitize our economies and enhance regional cooperation and resilience. African leaders and institutions are all at the forefront of this endeavor. It includes the African Union, our African Development Bank, Afri-Exim Bank. Looking ahead, more efforts will be needed to accelerate actions across three main transitions that would benefit African economies and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. In this, Japan is a key partner. First, ensuring universal energy access and a just and equitable transition to renewable energy. A comprehensive approach that charts Africa's energy development pathways, anchored in sustainable investments, strong partnerships, such as TCAD, that will be essential. The energy access gap impacting more than 600 million people in Africa will need the energy development space to keep pace with its ambitions for universal, reliable, and affordable access to clean energy. This will be supported by the Secretary General's Global Roadmap on Energy and his calls to accelerate a rapid transition to renewable energy to keep the 1.5-degree goal alive. The current global rise in energy prices can also prompt African countries to maximize the continent's great potential for renewable energy. But this too will require investments at scale and with a sense of urgency. Second, it will be urgent to transform our food systems. This means achieving food security, nutrition, self-sufficiency, and jobs for youth across the continent. Expanding Africa's breadbasket requires enhancing agricultural productivity and food systems that leverage new technology and modern irrigation systems, the mechanization of farming, and the reduction of post-harvest losses, which are all high priorities for the continent. The TCAD partnership can propel food systems transformation through appropriate investments in affordable technology and innovations at scale. And at the core is the opportunity to bring green jobs to our teeming youth and women. Lastly, there can be no solution to these interconnected crises if we don't address the inequality and its underlying factors. There is a need for a shift in the perception of Africa as a dependent continent to one that is a key actor on the global stage with the same rights and standing as any other region, be it financial or political. The mobilization of adequate financing for sustainable development is an imperative. At the global level, this requires concerted efforts from all of us, including the G20, international financial institutions, and multilateral and regional development banks, that should free up the additional fiscal space and find the solutions to the current debt crisis brought about by a global crisis of COVID and the war in Ukraine. The United Nations will continue to advocate for immediate debt relief and increased liquidity, the channeling of unused special drawing rights to countries in need, and reforming the criteria to assess eligibility. We must ensure all countries who need it can immediately access financial support on good terms and over a long time period. TCAD's multilateral and comprehensive partnership platform, including strong private sector participation and the principle of African ownership, can promote public-private partnerships at scale. This will include improving efficiency in public expenditures, strengthening revenue collection, harnessing private savings and private financial sector for development, and prioritizing investments in social protection and decent job creation while leveraging fintech. The role and impact in the lives of our young people and women must be a key outcome of these investments. It will also mean exploring opportunities for Africa to contribute as a player in the global value chains and to the global food and energy markets, again, leveraging the African Free Trade Area. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this conference comes at a time when we must urgently consolidate our partnerships and, together with all of you, build a prosperous and a sustainable Africa in which no one is left behind. I urge all of us to seize the opportunity of the upcoming General Assembly, the annual meetings of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank Group, the G20 meeting, and COP27, the Africa COP, to reinforce the actions that we must take in solidarity to recover better from COVID and respond to the impact of the continuing war in Ukraine. In doing so, we must remember that we are not starting from nothing. What we now need are solid blocks, building blocks to achieve our ambition of delivering the 2063 and the 2030 agenda in Africa. Once again, the United Nations stands ready to continue to accompany our 54 states of this continent in its journey. Again, another quote from Nelson Mandela: "It always seems impossible until it is done." Thank you.
شكرا لك على هذه المداخلة.
Ms. Amina Mohammed, thank you very much for very valuable intervention. What drew my attention the most is inside the African continent, there are so many potentialities, and you recognize that. That stayed in my mind. In the international community, it is essential to have mutual help and cooperation. Africa is not starting from scratch. Thank you very much for a very moving speech. Next, we go to Mr. Achim Steiner, Administrator of the United Nations Development Program. Please, the floor is yours.
Monsieur le Président de la République de Tunisie, His Excellency Mr. Saied, Prime Minister of Japan, Kishida, Fumio, President of the Republic of Senegal, His Excellency Macky, Sall, Chairperson of the African Union, my dear colleague Moussa Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General Amina, Mohammed, Special Envoy of the Prime Minister of Japan, Mr. Yoshimasa Hayashi, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I would like to join the Deputy Secretary General in expressing my sincere gratitude to the government and the people of Tunisia, as we have all done this morning, for hosting the 8th Tokyo International Conference on African Development here in Tunis, and for their warm welcome to this global crossroads of trade, culture, history, and indeed a shared ambition to achieve, as the Deputy Secretary General referred to, the Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2063. On behalf of the United Nations Development Programme, which has been a partner to the TICAD conferences from its inception, I would also like to thank the government of Japan, the African Union and the World Bank and other members of the United Nations family for having formed this partnership that has allowed us to come together over a period of 2.5 decades to chart a quality of partnership that I believe many of you have already alluded to this morning should be a way in which we think about the future of co-investing in Africa's development. But as we have also heard, TICAD 8 takes place at a time of unprecedented global upheaval. Surging food and energy prices are causing an acute cost of living crisis across Africa and indeed many parts of the world. In tandem, the grip of hunger and famine is tightening for millions of people, including in the Horn of Africa and the Sahel, where climate change in the form of unprecedented drought is compounding the situation. Add to that the fact that the cost of capital, the level of indebtedness is now confronting not only African nations, but indeed many developing countries with an acute debt crisis, and we can begin to realize the enormous pressures that are being faced. So TICAD does take place at a critical juncture, a juncture in which the kinds of partnerships and the willingness to co-invest of those parts of the world that are able to do so become fundamental to weathering this crisis. At this moment of acute development challenges, Japan's support in the announcements that the Prime Minister of Japan, Prime Minister Kishida, made this morning are indeed crucial and vital signals. And since Yokohama and TICAD 7, UNDP has been a proud partner to many of your countries in which we serve since decades to also facilitate the kinds of initiatives that TICAD has tried to outline. Over 90 projects in 33 countries across Africa, from reinforcing health systems during COVID, building human capital, sometimes in the middle of crisis, such as in Liptako Gurma, but also assisting with electoral processes in the Central African Republic, Cote d'Ivoire, the Republic of Congo, and also to be able to assist with building resilience to climate change. As we look forward, both to the 2030 Agenda and the Agenda 2063 remaining the compass with which we look to invest in the future, we have so many short-term crises to weather. Perhaps the greatest challenge, and Mr. President, listening yesterday to leaders from business in Tunisia, from youth leaders, but also from members of your government, it was striking to me how acute this potential risk of trading the long-term off in terms of trying to manage the short-term has become in our world today. To keep progress on track, UNDP's recent cost of living report and analysis has called for a moratorium, as the Deputy Secretary General also said, on official debt for 2 years for all developing countries to enable them to recover from the shocks and be able to invest in actually emerging from this crisis and in the kinds of transitions that we refer to. In tandem with domestic resource mobilizations, countries such as Japan do have a vital role to play in proactively leveraging their leadership in key fora. And I reiterate the Deputy Secretary General's call on the G7 and the G20. The fact of the matter is, as many of my colleagues who are also present here will confirm, the development financing landscape is deteriorating. It is the opposite of what is needed in the midst of this crisis. And in particular, as the continent of Africa transcends the age of aid towards a new era of investment and indeed co-investment, such as in climate change, that will drive prosperity, the potential opportunities also for businesses will grow exponentially. Japanese business at Yokohama, at TICAD 7, and African business leaders clearly indicated enormous potential for collaboration and cooperation, not least in the sectors that Prime Minister Kishida also referred to, the startup universe, the entrepreneurship that is emerging across Africa in the digital economy, but also in many other sectors, is indeed ripe for a country such as Japan to encourage its businesses to become not merely an exporter, but indeed a co-investor, a partner in building the kind of infrastructure that will drive Africa's economy into the future. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me end by simply reminding you that as we look to the future of development, there are so many stumbling blocks. But whether it is the challenge of climate change, whether it is the creation of employment, whether it is the shaping of digital ecosystems, which are not just a matter of connectivity, fiber optic cables, and access to apps, but indeed to create an inclusive economy in which those who traditionally would not have been the first ones to benefit will, because of the way governments shape development policy and prioritize their needs, may actually ring in that century of hope and prosperity that we're all looking to. Please count on us as part of the United Nations family for UNDP to continue to work alongside you and those international partners that are genuine co-investors in sustainable development. Thank you.
الشكر الجزيل على هذا.
Thank you very much. What Mr. Steiner has said is, in his comments, the new horizon should open up for Africa, and we are very much hoping that this will be realized. May I now have Mr. David Malpass, President of the World Bank Group, to speak.
Saied, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the World Bank Group, congratulations on the 8th edition of TCAD, held for the first time in North Africa. I'm sorry I cannot be with you in person. I'd also like to wish Prime Minister Kishida a speedy recovery. Amid overlapping crises facing the world, Africa is particularly vulnerable. Vaccination rates remain low. Many African countries face elevated debt levels and large debt service costs. Food insecurity is rising, and trade restrictions are taking tolls on people in countries that are largely dependent on imported food. Challenging times require effective responses to navigate crises and lay the foundations for more prosperous and resilient economies. The World Bank Group remains a committed long-term partner to Africa. Nearly half of our IBRD and IDA funding goes to Africa, and we work together closely in several areas. First, on trade. Trade is a powerful way to build resilient economies, reduce poverty, and boost prosperity. At the World Bank Group, we are advising governments on necessary trade policies, including on the need to avoid export bans and other trade restrictive measures. We are also working to reduce the cost and time required to trade food and livestock and improve the volume and quality of goods that are traded. We have provided extensive financing to countries in the Great Lakes region and countries like Chad, Cote d'Ivoire, and Nigeria to facilitate cross-border and internal trade and enhance the commercialization of selected value chains. We are building on what Morocco is doing in the agriculture and fertilizer sectors to bring food security through commercial cooperation across the Sahara. Second, we help African countries provide much-needed targeted social protection for the most vulnerable. We believe well-targeted social protection programs that benefit the poor offer much better value than untargeted food or fuel subsidies that are costly and benefit the richest consumers the most. In Tunisia, the COVID-19 Social Protection Emergency Response Project is helping to protect the most vulnerable members of society with income support while simultaneously strengthening the efficiency and the resilience of the broader social protection system. The Sahel Women's Empowerment and Demographic Dividend, or SWED program, is another example, and we can scale up and achieve much greater impact. We are also working with our client countries on subsidies. In Malawi, for example, we are working with the government to improve the targeting of their fertilizer subsidy program by supporting the most vulnerable households through better adapted social protection programs, while providing more appropriate support to commercially oriented smallholder farmers. And finally, much of our work in Africa is supported by IDA, our fund for the world's poorest. We partner on health, education, climate action, resilient and quality infrastructure, disaster risk management, and debt, just to name a few. IDA supports both the public sector and the private sector with IFC and MIGO, which are helping crowd in private investment. I want to reiterate my appreciation for Japan's strong contribution to IDA 20 and for hosting the launch event in Tokyo next month. In closing, let me reaffirm my special thanks to Prime Minister Kishida for his leadership in promoting the cause of developing countries and effective international financial institutions, and our very strong partnership with Japan. Thank you as well to President Saied for hosting TCAD 8.
شكرا لكم على هذا التدخل وعلى طرح جملة من القضايا مشفوعة بجملة من الحلول. نتوقف لمدة 3 دقائق دون أن نغادر القاعة لنستأنف بعد ذلك الجلسة المتعلقة بالجانب الاقتصادي.
Tunisia is the site of TCAD 8. It will present the course of African development in the post-COVID era for the further empowerment of Africa. Japan, moving forward with Africa. African development, led by African people. To embody this philosophy, Japan has been supporting Africa and hosting the Tokyo International Conference on African Development, or TCAD, since 1993. The conference aims to achieve sustainable development in Africa through human resource training and infrastructure improvement. Japan's aid for COVID-19 countermeasures has stimulated Africa's development of medical-related equipment and personnel. What is more, Japan has been contributing to public health awareness in African countries. Japan's aid for COVID-19 countermeasures has stimulated Africa's development of medical-related equipment and personnel. What is more, Japan has been contributing to public health awareness in African countries. Tunisia is the site of TCAD 8. It will present the course of African development in the post-COVID era for the further empowerment of Africa. Japan, moving forward with Africa. African development, led by African people. To embody this philosophy, Japan has been supporting Africa and hosting the Tokyo International Conference on African Development, or TCAD, since 1993. The conference aims to achieve sustainable development in Africa through human resource training and infrastructure improvement. Japan's aid for COVID-19 countermeasures has stimulated Africa's development of medical-related equipment and personnel. What is more, Japan has been contributing to public health awareness in African countries. Japan's aid for COVID-19 countermeasures has stimulated Africa's development of medical-related equipment and personnel. What is more, Japan has been contributing to public health awareness in African countries. Tunisia is the site of TCAD 8. It will present the course of African development in the post-COVID era for the further empowerment of Africa. Japan, moving forward with Africa. African development, led by African people. To embody this philosophy, Japan has been supporting Africa and hosting the Tokyo International Conference on African Development, or TCAD, since 1993. The conference aims to achieve sustainable development in Africa through human resource training and infrastructure improvement. Japan's aid for COVID-19 countermeasures has stimulated Africa's development of medical-related equipment and personnel. What is more, Japan has been contributing to public health awareness in African countries. Japan's aid for COVID-19 countermeasures has stimulated Africa's development of medical-related equipment and personnel. What is more, Japan has been contributing to public health awareness in African countries.
The Conference for Sustainable Growth. Inclusive, sustainable growth, and at the same time, we will aim towards economic achievement for African countries, for everyone who are gathered here today. We must make progress. It is very important that we make progress, overcoming many obstacles. Over the past few years, what we have witnessed, especially COVID pandemic, and the negative impacts from the pandemic must be overcome. This pandemic deepened the level of poverty. $500 million people have been pushed below the poverty line. International debt is deeper and heavier. It's placing a burden on many countries. Almost all of the countries are impacted by the pandemic, but especially countries in Africa. They had weak financial and economic base to start with compared to countries in the north. African countries are facing even greater difficulties. Those negative impacts would have aggravated the disparity between countries, increased unemployment. People lost their opportunities to get a job, especially young people, women and girls. And in the rural areas, the health situation was worsened, and it is moving toward social collapse. And there's the digital divide that is now getting deeper. Many people on the African continent cannot have access to leading technology. In modern times, if we had technology of the modern times, that would enable us to solve many problems. And between peoples, we can come closer together. We can also create jobs if we had cutting-edge technology. The poorest countries in Africa are the ones that are impacted the most. Economic issues, health issues. We see an accumulation of these issues on top of another. So I'm interested in listening to your views and your suggestions. By doing so, the partnership between Japan and Africa would allow us to overcome all these difficulties. That is the purpose of this conference. We are here united with a common perspective. We must guide ourselves in the correct direction. In many of the suggestions, we want to engage in discussion with a lot of suggestions from the participants. It could be issues overlapping number of countries, or it could be issues within a certain country. Many people on this continent who are vulnerable, and in order to make improvements to the vulnerable infrastructure for the benefit of countries to be able to grow and develop their economies, such cooperation is important. Various solutions, various strategies. We look forward to listening to such ideas in this meeting. First, I'd like to ask Prime Minister of Japan, His Excellency Mr. Kishida Fumio.
As we begin the plenary session, I would like to share my awareness of some issues. I hope that this will lead to your discussions. Africa is a continent of potential. Even though African economies and societies have been significantly affected by COVID-19 and the situation in Ukraine,